Chris DeGaulle.
He is Chris DeGaulle.
Chris DeGaulle.
I'm joined now by Chris DeGaulle.
Host of the Chris DeGaulle Show.
So let's bring in talk radio host Chris DeGaulle.
Also, his podcast is a must-listen every day. Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.
And host of the Chris DeGaulle Show.
Let's bring in Chris DeGaulle.
Please welcome Chris DeGaulle.
The Chris DeGaulle Podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Well, hey there, how do you do? And welcome into the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast. I appreciate you subscribing and downloading this show and making it a destination with regularity. It means a ton to us. I know there are a lot of places you could be. And it really helps us when you leave that 5-star review and that written review at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you have the time to scroll down to the bottom of the menu of shows and leave 5 stars, that helps us grow a lot. And of course, if you ever want to pass this show around to somebody else, we're always grateful for you spreading the word, because your endorsement of this show means more than anything I can do myself in terms of marketing or otherwise. So thank you very much. And thanks for supporting the sponsors who make this show possible, like John Ruhlman, the guy that runs usmedicalplan.com. And he wants to talk to you if buying health insurance is something you dread or you're doing and you think, I can't afford it, it's breaking me. I'm a small business guy. I want to treat my employees well. Or maybe you're somebody who has 2 or 3 employees, not a whole staff, but just 2 or 3, and you still want to give them health insurance, but it's costly. Look, have you shopped group insurance with John? USMedicalPlan.com works with 80 different private health insurers around the country, so John will shop and compare what you're currently paying. He's not going to give you cut rate coverage either. This is the thing that a lot of people worry about. They say, well, okay, if John gets me a cheaper rate, does that mean I'm not going to be covered as well? No. In fact, what John has told me a lot is he gets on the phone with people who complain about how much they're paying, and then he tells them, you know what, and you're not really getting the kind of coverage you think you're getting. So John does 2 things right away. He assesses the insurance you have, tells you whether the coverage is any good or not, then immediately goes to work to find you something less expensive with as good as or better than coverage that you currently have. So if you're a small business, if you are an individual, if you're a senior citizen, if you're a young person and you need supplemental coverage, or you just need a policy that you don't have at all, please reach out for just a couple of minutes and talk to John's team about it. They also have a great customer care program so that you're not doing bureaucratic nonsense, waiting on the phone, back billing and paperwork and blah, blah, blah. I love that John is a one-stop shop and a full resource for all your insurance needs, affordability, and full coverage. That is the name of his game. He's a young father himself, so that matters to him. It matters to me, and him taking great care of this audience is the most important thing to me. So cheaper insurance, better coverage, usmedicalplan.com, usmedicalplan.com, or 877-410-4321. Say, it is not time to panic. I'll tell you when it's time to panic. And, ultimately before his death, he said it's never time to panic because this country is worth fighting for. As long as we have breath and as long as we're able, the principles, the foundational bedrock principles of this country are worth defending and fighting for. I was overcome last night thinking, because it had popped into my mind yesterday prior to this verdict, I was overcome thinking about the 80th anniversary of D-Day is coming up next week. 80 years since 19-year-old boys, 18-year-old boys, some boys who weren't even of legal age to serve lied so they could get involved in going overseas and walking headfirst into a turkey shoot called the Nazi regime that had completely swallowed Western Europe. And these guys signed up as kids, my son's ages, jump off a boat in god-awful weather, in ice-cold water, and run up what has to be a half-mile wide beach, many of them having to scale cliffs, all the while Germans are firing on them, just assassinating them by the scores. And these boys are just laying around dead at the feet of the ones that were wounded or survived as they kept advancing. Guys paratroop in, and the Germans knew that could happen, and so they flooded the farm fields of France just in anticipation. In the middle of the night, they'd be surprised by air. Those paratroopers in the dead dark of night, our boys, glide down into these farm fields, get stuck in the mud, and drown many of them. Do you know to this day there are still young American soldiers whose remains have not been found, just lost from an overnight airdrop in the farm fields of France? I was thinking about 80 years since D-Day and how inspired and moved and motivated I was as an American when I visited those American military museums. Actually, it was the year Donald Trump won his presidency. And I thought to myself, if those kids could have that kind of fighting spirit and they felt this country and a free country was worth fighting for, if those boys could do that, if this country could galvanize and rally itself, the very least I can do is not mope, not sulk, not tell you that this is all lost and it's all over and the country's gone. And I know there were a lot of people that felt that way, and maybe you feel that way today. And I know there are a lot of my fellow pundits who say all is lost and it's over as we know it and there's no going back. I don't believe that's true. I don't choose to believe that's true. I can't believe that's true because that's not the fighting spirit of this country. That's not the boys of Pointe du Hoc who scaled the cliffs while being fired upon as they're climbing these rocky cliffs. That's not our spirit. We don't quit. We don't panic. We fight on. And we're going to. And we're going to most of all because the guy who's leading the fight, the guy with the most to lose, the guy that has been more persecuted and more attacked and has more incentive to just fold and quit and call it off and say, I've had it, I surrender. Donald Trump is not quitting. In fact, you could see yesterday the resolve in that man was perhaps greater than ever before. He walked outside that courthouse, and here's what Donald Trump said after they found him guilty on 34 counts.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
This is long from over. This is long from over. If that guy, after being railroaded, and his peaceful existence as a celebrity and billionaire has been destroyed, probably for the rest of his life. And I say, for what benefit? I've always asked, for what benefit, really? You know, what do you really believe that Donald Trump's ego is so big that he's willing to go to jail for the rest of his life? I don't. I believe the man genuinely loves the country as much as you do and as much as I do. And if this guy can go through all this and come out and say, we'll fight, we'll win, the verdict is in November, it's in your hands, not this sham jury, it'll be okay. He came out yesterday after that and said to you and me, it'll be okay, we'll fight on. And I thought, then how? How can any of us despair? How can any of us get defeated? No. All of us must now focus and fight like hell. Fight like the country depends on it, because it does. I was thinking about all that this guy has been through, all that we've been through as a country, because really, he is right when he says it is you they loathe. It is about you. This has always been about you. So when I say the things he's been through, it is the things we've been through, those of us who not only support him, but those of us who certainly oppose those in power today. It is about us and all of the things that we've been dragged through collectively as a country. And we're exhausted, and we're mad, and we're tired, and we're depressed, and we're sad, and we're all of those things. But he hasn't stopped, and we mustn't either. And just think about it. Just back away for a minute and assess all that's gone on. And he's not only still standing, he's thrived. When he ran, he was framed as a Russian asset by Hillary Clinton, a woman who still walks free today. When he just had the temerity to run, they laughed. I laughed. I dismissed him. Everyone dismissed him as a sideshow. A 15, 16, 17-way race in a Republican primary. Ain't no way he's going to win. And he skyrocketed, and he won. And so they began to frame him as a Russian asset. Hillary Clinton illegally paid for information that was completely falsified by foreign actors. She lied. She concocted an entire scheme to frame this man as a Russian asset and set in motion in perpetuity, whether she won or whether she lost, the greatest lie ever told about any individual person to run for and win the presidency, that he is a foreign asset. And that stuck in the public's, people that aren't paying attention, or the partisans. That worked. What Hillary Clinton sowed back in 2016 has stayed in the fabric of this country and the narrative of Donald Trump all along. I mean, here we are 8 years later, and much of this country still believes that Donald Trump is a foreign asset. That woman sowed the seeds of genuine hatred for a man that's done nothing wrong and is certainly no foreign asset. But he persevered anyway. She was not punished. She was fined. You want to talk about election interference? Donald Trump was sentenced, or found guilty, going to be sentenced, 34 counts, election interference. Why? To allegedly benefit himself and help himself get elected. She framed him as a Russian asset through an elaborate scheme. And what did she get? A $130,000 fine, and she walks a free woman today. Everyone sees this. Everyone knows what's happened here. Everyone knows what she did and that she walks free. Everyone knows what this is nonsense. It's nothing. It's not illegal. Everyone knows it. Every honest broker knows it. And every honest broker knows that people like Hillary Clinton have done far worse, provably, admittedly, and have gotten mere fines, if punished at all. So he's framed as a Russian asset. They spied on his campaign. They entrapped his associates. Our government embedded themselves in his campaign and spied on him and entrapped his associates. They attempted to sabotage his presidency for the entirety of it, with endless investigations, a lengthy impeachment trial. They impeach him once. They impeach him again over a phone call. And what was the undergirding message of that second impeachment? It was that he meddled in an election. I'm not kidding. You might forget that. The second time they impeached Donald Trump, it was under the auspices of he was trying to get dirt on what would be his future political opponent, even though Joe Biden, I don't think, had even declared that he intended to run. And he certainly wasn't polling like the lead Democrat candidate at the time. Do you realize that? As I was kind of making this list this morning, that I was reminded of this. It's the projection by Democrats. It's if you listen to them, And I've gotten good enough at this over the years that I think we probably talked about it. I'm sure if I go back and look in the archives, I will find that I had this analysis then. That second impeachment is actually the projection of where we are right now. It's what they're doing. They impeached Donald Trump, claiming he called up Zelensky in Ukraine to dig up dirt on Joe Biden, who was not even the declared candidate. But the Democrat Party had already decided that Joe Biden was going to be. Barack Obama had decided Joe Biden was going to be their sock puppet. They decided it back then, which is why they kept saying Donald Trump is digging up dirt on Biden because he's fearful of having to run against him for a second term. Joe Biden wasn't even a thought. Nobody imagined that withering old husk of decades and decades would actually do it. And then when he decided to do it late, he was trailing until South Carolina. He didn't look to be the odds-on favorite, and Democrats kept telling us that Donald Trump feared Biden the most. Do you remember that? It was never true. This was scripted from the jump. I hit rewind and I think about that second impeachment and I realized to myself, holy crap, it's been projection and a stage play all along. All along. They knew where this was going. They knew exactly how they were going to deal with him. They knew lawfare, and they had been concocting lawfare since that second impeachment at least. They'd scripted this thing out, chapter and verse. So they frame him as a Russian asset. They attempt to sabotage his presidency with endless investigations. They impeach him twice. They intentionally set up, I believe, stoked and allowed for January 6th. I believe that in my heart. They railroaded the election using COVID to do it. They gated off the United States Capitol for weeks on end. They tried to frame Donald Trump as the leader of an insurrection after they rigged the 2020 election and after this country, so many millions of us, were outraged at the sham outcome. Then they raided his home. And I'm halfway through the list. Then they raided his home. After all the shouting was over and Joe Biden was installed and we all tried to go back about our lives and the Democrats claimed normalcy and decency was going to be restored, then they raided Donald Trump's home. And that was the day. You would have thought after all of that before, I was voting for Donald Trump, but that was the day I said, oh, he's my ride or die now. That's it. I'm not interested in talking about any other candidate ever again. As long as he's running, I'm with that guy. Because that was the moment I knew there was really no going back. All of this had been pretty bad to this point, but this, again, part of the stage play, part of the script. If you walk all this out historically now, you see, well, my gosh, you could literally plan it all, couldn't you? You could write it, and I believe they did. Okay, now that we've gotten him out, we've got to see to it he never returns. How do we do that? We'll go after him somehow. Frame him. He took papers. He took papers he shouldn't have. Go, 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 go. Raid his home. Get him. And they did. They stormed his home. They went through his wife's things. They went through his son's things. And of course, I don't need to relitigate the hypocrisy of Joe Biden having illegal paperwork and Mike Pence having illegal paperwork. None of their homes were raided. None of them were indicted. And then came multiple indictments in multiple venues. Some 97 counts in 4 different venues. 2 at the federal level, 2 at the state level. There's Jack Smith down there in Florida with the Mar-a-Lago documents. There's the fraud of Fulton County in Georgia, Fannie, who kind of made a mess of things. There's the Jack Smith January 6th case in D.C., which, of course, is before the Supreme Court as we wait. And then there was the first one, this one. And at the time, I remember talking about Alvin Bragg being the first one in. And if you go back in the archives, I think you'll probably hear me joking and laughing at Alvin Bragg getting in. And you might also remember at the time that people were saying of the Alvin Bragg case that this was the silliest and that this was the weakest. Even leftists got upset. If you go back to when Alvin Bragg in New York brought these charges, Democrats were like, damn it, Alvin, you stupid SOB. This wasn't the way we were going to take him down and make sure he never came back. You're getting ahead of yourself. Everyone knew that Alvin Bragg ran. As a DA, he ran on getting Trump. This judge has made political donations to Joe Biden, his daughter. These people have openly pledged they will weaponize the judicial system to see to it that they get their trophy buck, Donald Trump. They were so egregious that even leftists at that time said, son of a, you're going to screw this up, Alvin. You're going to look too overzealous. This is the weakest of all of them. You're trying to charge him with stuff that he's already been, it's all been vetted by the FEC. He's not guilty of any of this. The statute of limitations has run out. Your partisanship and your craven desire to be, the Trump slayer in the Democrat Party. Alvin, you selfish bastard, said the Democrats to him. Do you remember? We covered this then. And I laughed because I said that he shot his wad. They got out over their skis too fast. Alvin, ha, ha, ha. I remember having fun with this because this was, the left considered it the weakest. They were the most angry at Alvin Bragg for doing it because they really thought they had the good. This was all the while January 6th investigations. Remember? They'd been building January 6th prosecutions and the Jack Smith story for years. And then Alvin Bragg. Well, as it turns out, we have an honest judge in Florida who said, sorry, Jack, you're throwing too much too fast. I'm going to let this stuff go in order. I'm not rushing this thing. And so they knew the door closed in Florida as soon as the judge down there gave him some stonewalling. The fraud of Fulton County humping her boyfriend and paying him with taxpayer money makes her look ridiculous. It's basically nullified the entirety of the Georgia prosecution. So the fraud of Fulton County, while she wins her reelection in a fraudulent Philadelphia of the South, Fulton County, Georgia, that's over. That's not real. That has no teeth. Jack Smith and the January 6th case is before the Supreme Court, which, as we've been talking, I've been harping on this, they're terrified this Supreme Court is going to help Trump. Specifically with the idea that he is immune from prosecution. They're terrified that that's coming, which is why they're actively trying to discredit them, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And so, ironically, interestingly, the one left, their only surefire venue, as all these doors have been closing and they've been stymied in this rigged game all along, ironically, the one left was the most radical and the one they didn't want. Because I will give the Democrats one thing. They are committed, and they are not going to stop. I used to say that I thought Rush was being a little exaggerative. I will admit, and Rush always used to say, don't doubt me. And I should have learned after the Trump presidency the first time, but I did always doubt a little bit that they would jail a president. It's like, they're not going to jail a president. Well, years later, even after his passing, I can say, Rush was right. Rush was right. I not only knew and told you, just go ahead and be ready for them to convict him yesterday. I told you there was no reason to be shocked. They were going to find him guilty. They were going to get there. Alvin had committed, and he was really their last best hope. He was first in, and he's probably going to be last out, and he's the most successful because he had, as it turns out, the most favorable, the most ridiculous of all of them, interestingly, of all of this ridiculousness, he's the most ridiculous. This setting is so ridiculous, though, that it was treated as legitimate, and he got his trophy buck. He got his political kill yesterday. And that's all this was ever about, was a feather in his cap and his place on Democrat Mount Rushmore. The legitimacy of it be damned. Same for this judge. And during this time, they tried to make him miss his son's graduation. I know he ultimately didn't, but they threatened him. And when he said, my son's graduation, I can't miss that, and it's tough. You're going to have to miss it. So now they've convicted him in a total sham trial that every honest person sees. And now the sentencing. The sentencing is July 11th. Why is that date significant? It's just a few days before the Republican convention. And you say, well, Chris, are they going to send him to jail? Well, I have to defer to the great Rush Limbaugh, who said, oh, they're not going to stop till they put him in a jumpsuit and they put him in prison. They will not stop. Will they jail Donald Trump? You need to be ready for that. Just like I told you yesterday, you need to be prepared and ready that they are going to convict him. You need to be prepared and ready that they will try to jail him, and they are going to very specifically choose the date of July 11th, a few days before the Republican convention, so that the Republicans will have a convention without a nominee because their nominee is otherwise detained. Don't you see? So that's where we are. That's a broad overview of where we've been. And after all that, he comes out yesterday and he says, it's okay. We'll fight. The real verdict is in November. We'll win. I'm good. And his website crashed because of all the people trying to donate last night. And there are people all over this country, people I don't know, some that I do. I don't know how much time you spent on X last night. I spent quite a bit of time on it. I posted a lot of these on the Harumph Society last night. Everyone from the Warbler in Maine, Susan Collins, to leftist Michael Rappaport, that lunatic. He said Trump just won. A guy called Ron Rule, for instance, says, I'm voting for Trump. I don't even like... Do you know the number of times I read this last night and this morning? I'm voting for Trump. I don't even like him. Well, I didn't know how I was going to vote, but now I'm voting Trump. I'm tired of the left, he wrote. Tired of DEI and gun laws and tax hikes and climate nonsense and billions to foreigners. I'm not voting for Trump. I'm voting for the pissed-off bull in a china shop who wants to burn D.C. to the ground, says one Ron Rule. This is the former CEO of As Seen on TV, and not a Trump fan. You know the number of times I read that last night? I don't even like this guy. I don't really even want to vote for this guy, but now I have no choice. I'm going to. Look, I make no predictions here. But anecdotally, I've never seen an electorate more galvanized and more focused and more ready to go to battle like the proverbial boys of D-Day, the political version. I think that this has focused us as a country like we haven't been focused maybe since 9/11. I'm kind of serious. And please don't misunderstand. I'm not suggesting that the deaths of all of these Americans, both in service, in heroic service in D-Day or that 9/11, that I'm making an analogy in the sense that they're of the same gravity. Those are deaths and human lives. And we're not talking about human lives yet. He gulps. So I don't ever want to put them on the same footing that way. What I'm talking about is the galvanized mentality of this country. I think we're in a unique and special time in this country's history where I think a lot of Americans are now focused and they see the real threat, the real enemy, the real danger to the country as we know it is here, right now on our front doorstep. And we have really one chance to vanquish this. This is it. This is our political D-Day this fall. And they're playing for keeps. They're up on the cliffs and they're shooting. And they want to take out the general. And if they can, they'll jail him just for their own delight. And so it's going to be up to us to storm the beaches. And I think we will. I believe that we will. And I think we're going to make strange bedfellows and odd allies because I think the left, as they always do, has gone too far, to say the least. They have pushed and they have agitated and they have sown discord and division in this country that has gotten so bad, I think it's actually whipsawed on them. And even people that maybe used to vote with them say, this is sick. I can't participate in this anymore. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this has become. But, I mean, hell, it's even got RFK Jr. out there saying, I don't think they know what they just did.
I think, Jesse, that it is going to backfire. This conviction is going to backfire on the Democrats. I think every time that President Trump has been indicted, that his approval ratings actually increase, his popularity increases. I think there's a large number of Americans who are going to see this as the politicization of and the weaponization of the enforcement agencies.
All right, and so that's enough. My point is, even he, an opponent who wants to defeat Donald Trump, sees it. And is at least man enough to tell the truth about it. Politico panicking, really, to be honest. They're a little scared of what they've done. You know, this is like when you were a kid and you were roughhousing and the lamp fell over and broke and you were having a lot of fun and then the lamp broke. And then you start to hear the heavy footsteps of Dad. They just broke the lamp. And a lot of the media knows it. A lot of the press, the leftists, they know it. They're kind of freaked out. Ooh, maybe we'll regret this. I think they will. Let's make them regret this. Let's make this dark, historic moment in history. Let's turn lemons into lemonade here. We don't despair, we fight. Because that's what this country has done when its back's been up against the wall. And we're very much up against the wall, but there's no reason we shouldn't fight just like those before us. And Donald Trump is certainly willing to, so isn't the very least we can do is to stand with him. Excellence in dentistry. That's what you're going to get at Williamsburg Dental. My friend Bob Spinato is back on the phone. He's in Broomall, just off the Blue Route. And with 2 new associates, now you can expand and offer more hours, maybe evening hours, possibly weekends, Bob.
Yeah, one of the things that I told them from early on when they started with me was the value of not only their own time, but other people's times. And they run on a similar schedule that I do. If you've got a 1 o'clock appointment, you're in their chair at 1 o'clock. And it's something that across the board at Williamsburg Dental, we really pride ourselves on, whether it's an appointment with the hygienist or whether it's an appointment with one of our doctors. The other thing is we now have some expanded hours in the evenings, and even there's some discussion about opening again on some Saturdays for services.
Yeah,
so,
but not you. You're fishing. You're not kidding anybody. It's not you going to be working on Saturday. Come on,
well, I'm in my 33rd year, and it should be the young guns.
That's
so
right. You've earned it. You've earned it.
I feel like I have. Thank you.
Pick up the phone or go online, make that appointment, 610-353-2700 or williamsburg-dental.com. Of course, the most important, those of you who are harumphers, I've been reading your reaction already today. Thank you for your thoughts. That's why I love the Harumph Society. I can get kind of instant feedback from this audience, and I hope you'll consider joining us this year because I'm making it rock bottom, dirt cheap, entry-level price for the remainder of the year. It's important to me that you're in the society. Reading some of the poll questions, I posted a few last night just to get Harumphers' point of view. I asked a few questions on the polls. Are you more energized or depressed as a result of the guilty verdict against Trump? More energized or depressed, Fast Eddie? Do you suppose Harumphers answered that question how?
I'm going to say energized.
Yeah, they are more energized by those that have taken the poll. It's about a 70-30 split. More energized to more depressed. About 30% of Harumphers said they're more depressed now. I asked, do you believe the verdict will be overturned on appeal? Been hearing that a lot, that we're confident about appeal. Folks, I want to caution you a little bit on that. This appeal thing, a lot of people have been kind of flip and dismissive, and they've said, this will be fixed on appeal. It's fine. Never forget their commitment to jailing him. They're going to figure out a way. They're going to figure out a way. We soothe ourselves in this madness by saying, they couldn't. They'd never. I just went through a laundry list of things we thought would never happen. Yes, they will. And an appeal is not going to happen before the election. And once the appeal happens and it's after the election, should Trump not be successful, I don't even want to think about it. But you can damn sure bet they're going to make a permanent example out of him should we have to suffer through another term of this chaos. I shudder to think what will happen to Donald Trump should he not be victorious in November. I can't even think about that. But if you think they're done, okay, well, we kept Trump out of there. We're done with him. No, they will continue to make an example of him to send a message to the rest of us. He does represent you and me, and they want all of us to be on notice. Oh, remember what Biden said? You want to take on the government, you're going to need an F-16. Biden stood in front of Independence Hall, fiery red lights behind him, the Nutcracker Suite Marines flanking him in the shadows as he pounded angrily on his podium.
Right now, you can't go out and buy an automatic weapon. You can't go out and buy a cannon. And for those brave right-wing Americans who say it's all about keeping America's independent and safe, if you want to fight against the country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun. No, I'm not joking. Think about this. Think about the rationale we use.
Yeah. F-15. Sorry, I said F-16. That's the way they think. You want to take us on? You're going to need a fighter jet. So nothing will delight them more in sending a message. Oh, we're taking out your general. You uppity people who think you're going to take us on? You think you're going to drain the swamp? You think you're going to lock her up? You think you're going to take us on? You're going to need a fighter jet. You think they're done with him? Donald Trump has to win. I believe his literal freedom depends on him winning, because if he doesn't, I believe they will jail him for the rest of his life. Do you know, they can sentence him to up to 20 years in jail. It's the maximum that they'll allow, but that's enough. He's not getting any younger. If they were to give him that, Donald Trump would die in jail, likely. And don't you know, the American left would love nothing more. They salivate at the prospect of not only taking a second term, but making sure he, as their trophy buck, and the loudest message they can send to the rest of us who dare challenge them, don't try it again. Remember what we did to him. Remember what we did to the last guy. You want to take us on, you're going to need a fighter jet. Your hero's not coming. They're like every worst villain in every movie. So do you believe the verdict will be overturned on appeal? Most of the harumphers do. Do you believe Trump will be sentenced to jail? Most harumphers do not. Do you think the conviction of Trump will help or hurt Trump's polling numbers going forward? Overwhelmingly, I think all of us, even the left, is saying, oh, sure, it's going to help him. I mean, even yesterday on CNN, I didn't get to the audio yesterday, but even yesterday, as this verdict was looming, they were lamenting on CNN, you know, this doesn't seem to be working. Nobody seems to be particularly bothered by any of this. I mean, I'm looking at the data points. He seems to only be getting stronger. Over at CNN, they were actually kind of quaking in their boots before the verdict, knowing full well this doesn't seem to be taking root the way we'd hoped.
I've been interested in whether or not these numbers would change at all during the course of this trial. Simply put, John, they have not. Pre-opening statements think Trump did something illegal, 46%. After the direct examination of Michael Cohen by the prosecution, look at where we are now, 46%. The percentage of Americans who think that the charges are very serious, in fact, dropped from 40% to a little bit more than 35% during the course of this trial. So, yes, perhaps things might have changed with those 12 jurors, but when it comes to the larger American public, there has been no change, at least so far, John.
Yeah, and so they are despondent about this, and they were, I'm sure, very hopeful that this verdict might change things, and in fact, they've only exacerbated that undoubtedly and made it worse. You know, interestingly, James Comey showed up. I actually can't believe they brought this up. I can't believe they dragged James Comey out. Was this on CNN?
This was on MSNBC. Or no, I'm sorry. Yes, this was CNN. It was just this was before the verdict, though.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so you want to talk about rubbing salt in a wound? Good grief! They brought out James Comey yesterday. This is the hood ornament of injustice. James Comey, the former FBI director, this is the guy. In 2016, this was one of those American moments that just like yesterday, I'll remember. I'll remember where I was the day James Comey came out with his findings on Hillary Clinton's unsecured server and her smashed BlackBerries. And he's laying out this case, and it's unbelievable. She has been keeping an illegal off-the-grid server, despite even Barack Obama saying she shouldn't do it, don't do it. She did it anyway. She's transferring all these emails to, remember the Anthony Weiner laptop, for heaven's sakes, and the phones? She's smashing phones. She's hiding things, bleach bit. You remember all that? Foreign governments. She's the Secretary of State. She's keeping a server in her bathroom or some damn thing. Like, it's insane. And she destroyed classified information to hide it. And Comey is laying all this out. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, holy crap, he's about to indict her. They're going to indict her. This is what you can't. I said, there's no way. This is coming. They're going to indict her. And you know what he said? You remember. But here we are in a presidential campaign, and no reasonable person could conclude that she intentionally, and so all's forgiven, and presidential election, and it's too close, and that would be, we don't do that here, that would be meddling in an election, and she didn't mean to, so all's forgiven. And you and I sat stunned. And that was when you knew. That was one of the biggest fault line cracks. That was when you started to really realize for the first time there's two tiers of justice in this country. Because everybody knows that if you did something just even so... Hell, we locked away a Marine or some such thing for taking a picture of a submarine. If memory serves, not too long ago. I mean, just taking a picture inside a submarine got a guy locked away. The Secretary of State was keeping illegal, confidential, classified information on a private server and destroyed it. And she paid a fine for something unrelated and walks free today. So they dragged James Comey out before this yesterday, and not only did they do that, he said this.
Hillary Clinton recently gave an interview to the New York Times. She reflected on why some women did not support her in 2016, how Democrats failed to protect abortion rights adequately. She again partially blamed you for her defeat for reopening the investigation into her email server, holding the press conference where you called her extremely careless without any formal criminal charges. She told the Times, quote, "Once he did that to me, the people, the voters who left me were women. They left me because they just couldn't take a risk on me because as a woman, I'm supposed to be perfect. They were willing to take a risk on Trump, who had a long list of, let's call them flaws to illustrate his imperfection, because he was a man, and they could envision a man as president and commander-in-chief." What did you think? What was your response?
We were never trying to do anything to either of the candidates in 2016. We regretted being involved. We were just trying to do the right thing, given the facts that landed on us.
And what would you say to Hillary Clinton if she were here right now? I mean, do you feel any regret, or you think she's the one that made the decisions to do X, Y, Z?
I regret being involved, but I didn't put 300,000 of her emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop that the FBI then had to look at. And so I hated the situation, but I bear her no ill will. And I get the pain she feels, I'm sure, about 2016. I hope we had nothing to do with the outcome, but we were just trying to do the right thing. And I still think we did the right thing.
And there he is, the Boy Scout, James Comey, always trying to do the right thing, but always mindful of his own ego and reputation. So he can't, I mean, Hillary Clinton sandbags him in their newspaper of record. He's like, I can't just, I mean, I'm still James Comey, the most perfect human being on planet Earth. I can't let that go completely unaddressed. So I'm not the one that put the 300,000 emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop, okay? Ooh. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the CNN audience that just heard that from the Boy Scout on indictment day of Donald Trump. So even the CNN audience was reminded of the two-tiered system of justice, ironically by none other than James Comey himself. That's really quite something, and Jake Tapper led him right to it. Glad to have you along today. Boy, the harumphers are pouring in. I'm glad to hear it. I want to see you harumphing with us. Harumph for Trump gear is up. And remember, every nickel of it, I said this earlier, if you're just joining us, every single nickel of the Harumph for Trump gear at the Harumph Society, my Substack newsletter, or if you go to chrisstigall.com, we just put this up yesterday. We thought it would be fun if you wanted to wear something to be supportive, but also every single nickel of it we're sending directly to the campaign. That's what we've been trying to figure out how to do, is to be helpful to the campaign. We were grateful that they made time for us today. I can't imagine that they're not insane with media requests right now. So Danielle Alvarez, who's a senior advisor to the Trump campaign, made time for us today. I appreciate it. And I think, Danielle, the first question that all of us have is, how can we help? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. I love your idea about Harumph for Trump. I mean, please, I hope that your listeners, go and buy merch, and thank you for making that donation to the president's campaign. The other option is to go to donaldjtrump.com. We want to make sure to send a resounding message today. I mean, what happened yesterday, those 34 rigged charges, I mean, it's a ploy for interference in our election on behalf of Joe Biden and his campaign. Our attorneys are going to appeal that rigged verdict very quickly because there was no crime committed. It was a highly conflicted judge. And most importantly, it was the weaponization of our justice system and targeted lawfare against President Trump and the Republican nominee. So we want everyone this morning to get involved. The president is strong. He is resilient. I'll be honest, yesterday I was more enraged and sad for our country as I watched this. But this morning, let's all take a lead from President Trump. Again, strong and resilient, and let's send a strong message to the Biden camp of what they have just done.
Do you ever, I kind of took stock this morning, Danielle, and went through a brief but extensive timeline of what's been thrown at this man. And it's a lot. And it's something that most of us wouldn't even tolerate half of. And yet, even after this, he goes out yesterday and pumps his fist and says, don't worry, it'll be okay. We'll fight. The real verdict is in November. It's going to be all right. And I said in my monologue, I don't know how many of us could weather that and have that attitude. And I feel like those of us who may feel sad or dispirited, if he can do that, well, then we certainly can. We can't pack up our tent and quit or be sullen and sulk here. I mean, if he's going to fight, then I feel we got to have his back.
That's 100% right. Listen, there are very few who understand what it's like to be a defendant in a criminal trial. President Trump is someone who, has not been convicted of a crime, hadn't been in trouble, in his 70 years of life. And suddenly, because he has the audacity to run for president and defeat Hillary Clinton, because he has a tremendous 4 years with a strong economy, a closed border, and peace through strength at home and abroad, because he has the audacity to run again to continue fighting for the American people, the left has weaponized our judicial system, has targeted him with lawfare. And that's why I say, and I agree with you, we have to take our lead from him. I had a moment where I was enraged. I couldn't believe what's happening in our country. I'm Cuban American. My parents fled communist Cuba, where they punish their political opponents, where they jail their political opponents. It's something that happens in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, not something that happens in the United States. And I watched this last night with my two daughters. I'm not in New York this week, but I have been in the courtroom with the president. And I was enraged, and I was very sad for our country. But now is the moment to be resilient. Now is the moment to take the president's lead. He not only, walked up and greeted patriots in Manhattan who were there being supportive of him. He had a fundraiser last night. We're back to business. We're back on the campaign trail. And I urge your listeners to go to donaldjtrump.com and find a way to get involved in President Trump's movement, in the MAGA movement, because he knows that they're doing this to him, but he's fighting for us. Yep. And so we have to stand with him and make sure to get involved, because as he said, the real verdict will come in November.
I got to tell you, what amazed me was the reaction by some, if they're honest, on the left. There was this kind of, oh, crap. And I really do think that many of them were sort of hopeful. Okay. We've pushed the envelope. We've played with fire. This has been fun, but maybe we ought not go the full Monty here. And then they did. And now you're reading in Politico and other places, oh, I'm not so sure this was, we might have done it. You see it all over Twitter. Leftists saying, well, I think Trump's just won. This doesn't feel like they're celebrating quite like maybe some of us thought they would be. Is that just me?
Well, you brought up the Politico article, so let's use the very word. Democrats are in quote unquote freak out mode.
Yeah.
And it's because none of this played out how they thought. They thought they could hold him down in a Manhattan courtroom. Well, President Trump used New York City as the backdrop for his campaign when he went to Harlem, to a bodega, to a Dominican community, to a minority community, and received tons of support. He went to the South Bronx. I was at the South Bronx rally with him. We had 25,000 patriots in attendance. When he went to the Teamsters and he went to a construction site at 7:30 in the morning, you certainly couldn't see Joe Biden there, waking up that early and drawing that amount of crowd. And on Wednesdays and on weekends, when court was not in session, he's been fundraising. We beat Democrats in fundraising last month by $25 million. I can't wait to have our fundraising call today to see what our end of month looks like. I hope we raise $1 million for every one of those 34 rigged charges.
The campaign's, sorry to interrupt, Danielle, but the campaign's website crashed yesterday. It was so overloaded with, I assume, people getting on donating.
We had so much traffic yesterday that you're absolutely right. The website crashed. Luckily, we have an incredible team who was able to get it up, because that's the momentum. And what Democrats try to do is do this sleight of hand. They did this trial for a talking point for their campaign, and you're absolutely right. It backfired on them. You know why? Because the American people are not going to be gaslit. They're not going to be lied to. They're not going to accept the dishonesty. You know what matters to them? Because we've seen it in polling. Our campaign released a memo saying we've seen it in polling. People believe this trial to be a farce. What they care about, and what we see in our campaign polling and in public polling, is that people care about the economy. They care about rising costs. They care about being able to afford rent or pay their mortgage. They care about the open border and rising migrant crime and fentanyl pouring across. They care about college campus chaos by pro-Hamas supporters, by terrorist sympathizers on our college campuses. They care about what's happening, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Hamas, and we have no peace. You cannot achieve the American dream in Joe Biden's America. And that is why we are going to resoundingly send a message and elect President Trump in November, because we remember what it was like when he was in office.
You know, I have a headline in front of me today, Danielle, from Fox News, unrelated, but I have a point. Boston Democrat mayor says criminals should not be prosecuted for theft, and the gang registry should be abolished. All over this country, cities are descending into absolute hell, and the criminals walk free, including illegal aliens who assault cops and walk free. And all of us know it, and all of us are living it, and all of us are watching it, and yet Donald Trump is found guilty, and we have to have a discussion about will he be sent to jail for nothing, for nonsense. The juxtaposition of the lawlessness in which we're living, and you can hit rewind and go all the way back to Occupy Wall Street, it's undeniable now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, and everyone sees it, that there is a two-tiered system of justice. The lawless thugs, the thieves, the murderers, the gunmen, they walk free, and Donald Trump could potentially be heading to prison.
You know, I never thought it could be possible. Of course, our lawyers are going to appeal the rigged verdict very quickly. But let me put a finer point on what you just said, because you just hit it. It's a never before seen abuse of executive and prosecutorial power. The case that the jury was asked to rule on the judge allowed them to interpret an underlying crime that, first of all, President Trump has never been charged with, and secondly, that the prosecution never even explicitly stated. We live in a banana republic. Yes. Yesterday was an absolutely historic moment, and the juxtaposition of these soft on crime DAs, my husband's a police officer, so you really got me going. The juxtaposition here of these soft on crime Democrat cities and these fake rigged charges against President Trump. It's why we see it in polling, why the American people are speaking so loudly. They will not be fooled.
I really thank you for your time. I don't want to take too much of it. I guess I'd ask, with sentencing coming before the RNC convention, I've actually seen some people suggest, hey, Laura Trump, let's move up the RNC convention. Don't let them play this game. Do you think they're going to try to keep President Trump from accepting the nomination in person at the convention? Have you had that discussion inside the campaign yet? Do you know?
You know, yesterday we were really focused on the verdict we had just received. We were really focused on getting our fundraising website back up, as you can imagine.
So it's a day-by-day kind of thing.
I'm going to tell you, as a staffer that's focused on putting on the convention, you know, I suppose it's a possibility because we live in uncharted territory. But I don't think there's a way they can keep him from accepting the nomination. He was chosen in historic fashion to be the nominee of our party. It happened, sooner than has happened in modern history in a competitive primary, nonetheless. And as I said at the top, he's strong and he is resilient, and he will be there to accept this nomination. And not only the Republican Party, but American voters, regardless of political affiliation, will support him.
Danielle Alvarez with the Trump campaign, DonaldJTrump.com if you want to give directly. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And meanwhile, by the way, I welcome Chris to the Harumph Society as a founder. Very cool. For the rest of the year, I have just decided, because the Harumph Society is a free market and free speech destination, and I want to keep it that way. And so I've opened it up at my rock bottom dirt cheap price for the rest of the year. If you want to subscribe, $2.50 a month, because first of all, I just want as many people to participate as possible. So I'm just locking that rate in for the rest of the year. If you want to become a founder, I'm sending you a Harumph for Trump bumper sticker in just a few days. I'll let you know more about that if you have become a founder. For everyone, if you want to give directly to the Donald J. Trump campaign, please do it. You don't have to do it this way, but know this, that if you go to my website, ChrisStigall.com, at the store there, the online store, you can buy yourself a Harumph for Trump t-shirt. You can get a mug and all of that. Every single nickel of the proceeds raised on the Harumph for Trump gear goes directly to the Donald J. Trump campaign. So that's just my little tiny way of trying to be helpful in the meantime. You certainly don't have to. I mean, if you're going to give, just go ahead and give directly to Trump's campaign if you want to. But if you want a little commemorative edition of something, like I said, I'm mailing out the Harumph for Trump bumper sticker to the founders gratis as a thank you for supporting the effort. For all of you who are members, or even if you're not, you can go to ChrisStigall.com, get your Harumph for Trump t-shirt, and show your support. But I do hope you'll join the conversation, because it's great. You'll feel better when you talk with fellow people in this audience and Harumphers all over the country who are in communication every day in the comment section there. Founders, I can message back and forth with regularly too. So I hope you'll take advantage of it. I now more than ever, I take great comfort in knowing that there are friends in a place where we don't have to deal with trolls and haters, and we can actually lift one another up, because that's important as we get through this year. So ChrisStigall.com, the Harumph Society on Substack, it's all linked there. The store is there too, ChrisStigall.com. All right. Michael Berry is the executive director at the Center for Litigation at the America First Policy Institute. We are grateful that he made time today. We knew, I'll say I knew. I know everybody was hopeful and optimistic, but you just knew how hell-bent they were to get a conviction on President Trump, and they were going to do it. And I had every confidence they'd figured out how to get there, and so they did, Mr. Berry. And from a legal perspective, it's hard for me to ask a respected officer of the court like yourself, what you make of it, because I don't think there's a single individual that legitimizes what happened yesterday. But how do you read it, sir? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Yeah, the simplest way to put this case is it's a miscarriage of justice. I mean, take your pick as to the many different ways that this case has become an absolute train wreck, has made our legal system and specifically Judge Merchan, the laughing stock of the world. But you can start with Judge Merchan himself. Should never have been on the case. Should have recused himself because of his conflict of interest. He's a Democrat donor, a Biden campaign donor. His daughter is a Democrat operative. His wife is a donor. So that's a clear conflict of interest, and he should have removed himself. And then you move to Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, the same prosecutor who, after the Federal Election Commission, the U.S. Department of Justice, and his predecessor all looked at this case and said, there's nothing here. There's no crime. There's nothing we can prosecute and convict on. But Alvin Bragg said, no, I campaigned on get Trump, so I've got to find a way to do this, right? I'm going to force the square peg into the round hole. And he had Judge Merchan's help, and that's exactly what he did. And then all the way up to just a couple of days ago, the jury instructions that we heard. Well, I mean, look, and then during the trial itself, the evidentiary rulings that Judge Merchan made, stacking the deck in favor of Alvin Bragg, hamstringing and handcuffing President Trump's legal defense team. And then you get to the jury instructions where he says it doesn't have to be unanimous. The only thing that they have to be unanimous on is that it was Donald Trump who did it. But otherwise, you don't all 12 have to agree on how the crime was committed. And that's the first time I've ever heard that, right, in a criminal setting, where you tell the jury, 4 of you can agree that it was Colonel Mustard in the library with the lead pipe. 4 of you can agree that it was Colonel Mustard in the kitchen with the revolver, and the other 4 can say it was Colonel Mustard in the garden with the knife. And we'll call that unanimous. It's good enough for us. We'll lock him up for that. So this whole trial has been a miscarriage of justice, and if there is any justice, it'll be thrown out on appeal.
You served in the Marine Corps. I know once a Marine, always a Marine. You teach law as an adjunct professor at the United States Naval Academy. From your perspective of service and those you have served alongside, this is a tough question, but when you see something like this happen, and because you also happen to be an officer of the court too, so you're kind of, I would assume you're doubly, to put it mildly, disappointed or dispirited. For men and women who serve this country and are quite literally willing to die and have, what a day this must be. What a gut punch.
We've had an all-volunteer military for more than 50 years now. We ended the draft in '73, and when you have an all-volunteer military, especially a nation with a target on its back as big as the United States, in order to successfully have an all-volunteer military, that's a pretty remarkable thing when you compare us to other nations around the world. Look at all the countries, even our allies, that have mandatory military service, and we don't. How do you do that? How do you maintain a military as large and as strong as ours on the backs of volunteers? It's because those Americans who raise their right hand and say, yes, just as you said, I'm willing to give up my life for this. It's because there's something that they believe in. They believe that the military offers them something, right? Or in the case of just our country offering something, right? There's something that our country has that I believe in that I'm willing to give up my life for. And the thing is, the things like what we saw happen yesterday, what we're seeing coming out of the Biden administration, rampant crime, soaring inflation, non-existent borders, people quickly begin to lose their faith and confidence in the very institutions of the United States. Those are the things, that parts of the reasons why they're willing to give up their lives and serve. And I speak from obviously personal experience that if I feel like it's not worth fighting for, right? Then I tell my kids, you know what? Your dad served and he was proud to serve this country. I was proud to be in Afghanistan, but I wouldn't advise you to do that. And other parents come to me and say, my kid wants to join the Marines. What do you think? And I would say, it was great when I was in, but I wouldn't do it now. There's a reason for that. And it's because our country is losing its footing on what made us the greatest country on earth, what President Reagan described as the shining, city on a hill. And when you start to lose that, people begin to lose confidence. Now, it's not all gloom and doom. I will say, I was thinking about this, and I feel like we're in a situation where the cheaters have tried to win, right? And when you're up in in competition, and the other side is trying to cheat, you don't try to beat them by cheating, right? By repaying an eye for an eye. That's not how you prove that cheating doesn't win. You show them that cheating doesn't win by beating them fair and square. And that's what we need to do on November 5th. We need to just overwhelm them on November 5th and show them your cheating, your schemes, your shenanigans, they're not going to win. The American people are going to speak, and we are going to deliver a decisive victory on November 5th. And as President Trump said, I think it was one of the greatest lines I've ever heard him say, success will be his revenge.
Yes. Yes, and when he comes out yesterday after this and says, it'll be okay, I have to tell you, it was so, in the best sense of the word, paternalistic for the country to hear a man under this kind of duress and pressure and lawfare, to hear him come out and say to the rest of us, it'll be okay. The real verdict is in November. I just thought, at that moment, I thought, well, my gosh, how can any of us sit around hanging our heads and pack up our tent and go home? I mean, the game is on. As you said, you can't. And to your point about a lack of inspiration, I just want to remind people that our current pretend commander-in-chief, this is the kind of inspiration he elicits. Here he's speaking at a graduation ceremony at West Point, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. And he says this, and you can tell literally no one in this audience actually believes what the current, air quote, commander-in-chief says. Listen to this.
Never forget, America is the strongest when we lead not only by our example of our power, but by the power of our example. You can clap for that.
You can clap for that. I mean, that no one believes he believes that, and he certainly doesn't project that, Mr. Barry.
Yeah, I mean, he delivers these flat applause lines, right? And when the audience doesn't clap because, just as you said, they don't believe a word he's saying. They're just shocked that he actually read the teleprompter correctly, and then and so they don't applaud. And then he says, "Hey, you're supposed to applaud there, right? I mean, my teleprompter said, and he even says, pause.
Yes.
Like
But these are servant. These are men and women who have just said, "I'm going to fight and die for this moron." They've got to be sitting there thinking that. Good Lord, what have I done? Maybe is there part of them? Do you suppose? I don't know. I kind of joke, but
when you serve in the military, right? There's such a high premium placed on leadership and strong leadership, and you contrast the clip that you just played with what we saw from President Trump outside the courthouse yesterday evening.
Yes.
Right. And you talk about somebody who is strong and resilient. And when you're in a military situation and your backs are against the wall and you've got, hot lead coming your way from the enemy, you want to look to a leader who's standing resolute, right? And who is standing strong, who's unflappable in the face of danger or in the face of bad news or negative circumstances, whatever the case might be, and says, "Hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to win this."
Yes.
And I mean, who doesn't want to follow somebody like that? It's like you said, how could you look at that and not be inspired to say, "Okay, you know what? Stop having a pity, a self-pity party. Stop saying woe is me. Pick yourselves up and let's go. We've got some fighting and winning to do."
LFG, that's right. Michael Berry, Executive Director at the Center for Litigation at the America First Policy Institute. From a legal perspective, I hate even talking about this like it's legitimate, but I guess we have to acknowledge that this is going to go through an appeals system. I guess conventional wisdom is that any kind of appeal, there's going to be a sentencing on the 11th. What do you anticipate from that? Do you think they'll actually jail this man to try to keep him from participating in campaigning or the convention, more to the point, to be there in person? So it's twofold. Will they jail him? Does the Supreme Court get involved? I have no faith that any kind of appeals court in New York overturns this personally, but maybe you see it differently?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll start with the second question first. I do think that he stands a much better chance on appeal, either through what's called the New York Appellate Division, which is the intermediate level court, or the New York Court of Appeals, which is actually New York's highest court. So he stands a better chance in those two courts than he did in front of Judge Merchan for the aforementioned reasons. But what, right now, the options at Judge Merchan's disposal in terms of appeal, in terms of sentencing are, yes, like you said, he could sentence him to spend time in jail. Each of the 34 counts carries a maximum 4-year sentence. And usually in a situation like this, it would be an absolute shock and highly unprecedented for the judge to issue what's called consecutive sentences, right? In other words, 34 times 4, and in all those, that entire, whatever that number, I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician, and they have to run consecutively, versus what they say is the sentence runs concurrently. In other words, he would just serve a maximum of 4 years in jail. To answer your question, I think at a personal level, there's nothing that Judge Merchan would love more than to send Donald Trump to Rikers Island or wherever he would end up going and seeing him in the orange jumpsuit.
Yes.
However, I do think that the political creature that is Judge Merchan understands and intuitively and instinctively that mugshot of Donald Trump in an orange jumpsuit would become the centerpiece of a rallying cry come November 5th. And he doesn't want that to happen. And so instead, and he also wants to try to recover his own image, right? And so what he could do is paint himself as this, well, I could sentence you to jail, but I'm such a magnanimous judge, right? I'm such an honorable, magnanimous man. I'm not gonna send you to jail. I'm gonna let you off. And the other options would be he could issue a fine, he could give him probation, or he could give him community service. Now, the community service one is kind of interesting because that's one where people think, oh, he could humiliate him, right? Merchan could humiliate Donald Trump, which is exactly what the left would love to see. Make him pick up trash on the subway, right? How humiliating to a billionaire to have to go and pick up trash on the New York subway. I actually think that could play into Trump's favor.
Yes.
Think about the campaign opportunity that could be. Hey, who wants to come help President Trump clean up the city?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so anyway,
So that's interesting.
I don't want to get carried away.
No. That's an interesting analysis, which I had not heard before. You don't believe ultimately he sentences him to prison, although I do believe, like you, that Democrats ultimately, that's their trophy buck moment, putting him in jail. And even the late, great Rush Limbaugh said Democrats won't stop till they actually achieve that. I tend to agree that's what they want to do. You think they might show some restraint there?
Just because of the effect that would have on the election,
yeah.
Right? This case has been about the election from the very beginning, right? Let's be absolutely clear about that. That's all this case has been about. And now that they've quote unquote got their man, they can now call him a felon, right?
Yeah.
So that I think that's good. That's the 80% win for them. That's good enough. They can take that and begin campaigning off of that. Oh, at least he's not a felon.
Yeah, and by the way, my prediction on that, Mr. Barry, is that Joe Biden will back out of everything now, and that being the justification. I'm not going to dignify a felon. I really think that's coming. You?
Yeah, exactly. That's all they need is to be able to use that label, to label him a felon. But if they were to lock him up, then Trump becomes, in essence, a bit of an American Nelson Mandela, doesn't he?
Yes.
And I think they want to avoid that.
Mm-hmm. So you don't ultimately think that you're talking community service. How about home confinement? Can the judge keep him off the campaign trail and say you got to stay locked away in Trump Tower or something?
I think that would raise too many legal complications for the judge. That's another reason why putting him in jail is an issue. Things like he would have to have a Secret Service detail with him in jail. How does that work? How does he campaign? And if and when he wins in November, you've got that couple month period between November and January. How does he govern? Or how does he begin the process of transitioning to governance from his jail cell? And then what happens after inauguration? How does he do the inauguration from jail? So in other words, there's just so many things that it's uncharted water. There's all kinds of consequences that people haven't even thought about yet. There are so many countries around the world that if you are convicted of a felony offense, you're not allowed to travel there. You know, the United States has that for people coming from other countries, and so those countries reciprocate. How does the president of the United States, he's now on a travel ban list, you know, and then irony of all ironies, he can't even, he's a resident of Florida. He's a registered Florida voter now. Under Florida state law, my understanding is that if you are convicted of a felony, you have to complete your whatever your sentence is. That sentence has to be fully completed before you are reinstated in terms of voter rights. And so the person running for president of the United States is not even going to be able to vote in his own election.
Wow.
I mean, it's a Shakespearean tragedy.
So given all of that, do you believe it warrants the Supreme Court getting involved, or would that be unprecedented, or do you think this group of people would say, given all the things you just laid out, we really are going to have to inject ourselves here?
Everything that happens from this point forward is unprecedented. You know, there's no script for this, right? So everything that happens from this point forward is going to be, this is the first time, fill in the blank. So, you know, I do think the way to put a stop to this is just people have got to get out and make their voices heard on November 5th. It needs to be an overwhelming and resounding victory, and it needs to be too big to rig. You know, the margin of victory has got to be so large. And I know I'm speaking into Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You guys, there's a reason you're called the Keystone State. You know, you're going to be the state that holds together, you know, essentially the union come November. And so Pennsylvanians have got to get out and vote, make their voices heard, and it has to be an overwhelming victory, too big to rig. And I also think it's important to send the message: cheating doesn't win. This is not how you beat your political opponents. It's not by lawfare, weaponizing the government, and locking them up in jail. The way you win is you win fair and square at the ballot box.
You are still, when all this is said and done, like I said, an officer of the court, a Marine. You are bullish on the American judicial system and the country as a whole. You're still bullish. You're taken aback. You're what? How would you describe yourself, Michael Berry?
Yeah, I am disappointed but undeterred. As a Marine, I fight best when I'm backed into a corner. You know, we love our history in the Marine Corps, especially famous stories from the Marines. And there's a famous one from, there's stories from World War II in Korea, but one which a small Marine unit was completely surrounded. And they looked at the commanding officer, and the Marines just were like, we're all going to get, overrun and killed. And he said they're surrounded. They can't get away from us now. Or they've surrounded us. They can't get away from us now. And so that's kind of how I feel. We're backed into a corner. Well, now we only have one option. We got to fight our way out of this. And so that's why I so love seeing President Trump's resolve, and just his. He just looks like, he's still a Teflon man. He's not going to let this affect him. He understands this is so much bigger. I mean, and obviously, in many ways, it's about him. The only crime that Donald Trump committed was deciding to run for president or run for re-election. That's the great crime here. If he weren't running, I guarantee you we wouldn't be having this conversation. But because he did decide to run for re-election, this is what's happened. And I think he understands that at a very personal level, but he also understands it's actually, as he says all along, it's not really about him, it's about us. Because he's just standing in the way. And this is what the left wants to do to all of us.
I tell you, it really, as I said earlier, it reminded me of Joe Biden saying, you want to take on the government, you're going to need a fighter jet. It's that attitude of you don't screw with us, we're the government. And it's as if they're trying to kind of take out our proverbial patent just to make a point and let us all know, don't screw with us, we're the government, is very much the way this feels right now.
Yeah, I actually, ironically, I'm reading the book 1776 by David McCullough, and it's fantastic. I highly recommend it. And it just, another great American who was running for president previously, Vivek Ramaswamy, he loves to say this is our 1776 moment.
Yes.
That was something I heard him say often. And what's interesting as I'm reading this book, you do get that sense is that that's what was happening during that time. that got the colonists so up in arms and eventually decided to rebel. And I'm not suggesting we need to have a revolution or take up arms. I'm not suggesting that in the slightest. But in terms of the zeitgeist, right, that it feels like, just as you said, the Biden administration is saying, we're the ones in power. We call the shots. Get in line, do what we say, or else, right? Remember what we said with the vaccine? Yeah. I'm losing my patience. You better do what I say. Yeah. You know, and you contrast that type of egomaniacal control freak leadership with what you described earlier with Donald Trump being more paternalistic. Like, it's okay. We're going to be okay, right? Follow me, and I'm going to get us out of this. And so that very much reminds me of the difference between the British method back during the colonial days.
Yes.
And someone like George Washington, right?
Yes.
And basically saying, we need to win on the power of our convictions and the rightfulness and the righteousness of our cause. And I feel like that's where we are today, heading into November, is that we're on the side of truth and justice and the American way. And that's what we need to be standing on. And we cannot stoop to the level of those on the left who essentially see the ends justify the means, right? Yeah. As long as we stay in power, whatever it takes for us to stay in power. And they see Donald Trump is the greatest single threat to them staying in power. And that's why the ends justify the means, whatever we have to do to take him out.
Michael Berry, Executive Director at the Center for Litigation at the America First Policy Institute. He is a professor of law at the United States Naval Academy. He is a Marine, and it's been a very insightful conversation, Mr. Berry. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you. Hey, Mike Lindell and MyPillow, you know the name. 20 years they've been singing the jingle on Fox News and on the radio, and it's no secret that Mike and the company have come under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of attack. Big box stores have tossed MyPillow from their stores. Even the online retailers now won't sell MyPillow products. And who does that hurt, really? I mean, yeah, I understand they don't like Mike's position on the election or whatever, but Mike employs hundreds of Americans, hundreds of Minnesotans who make great products. If you know the MyPillow products, I sleep on them every night. So does my dog, Dean. They're great products. And he wants to sell them to you at unbelievable prices, by the way, but they're backed with a 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantee, and most importantly, again, they're made here in the United States. So, it's not something he's asking me to say. It's just something I'd like to remind you of, that a guy who has an opinion, who happens to own a very successful American company and employs a lot of Americans who make great American products that a lot of you have bought and owned or are looking to buy and own. I just want you to know that while he takes it on the chin a lot out there for having the positions he has, he wants to keep his employees busy. He wants to keep the company moving along. And so he's passing on huge, huge savings to you in what he's calling the $25 extravaganza. Getting the word out, I want to invite you to check out this $25 extravaganza today. 2 multi-pack MyPillows, just $25. MyPillow sandals, just $25. I'm looking at the list of these deals right now. 6-pack towel set, just $25. 6-pack of towels, $25. And the MyPillows with the new Giza fabric, just $25. And here's the thing, if you order any or all of this stuff, if you exceed $75 with your order, he ships it to you for free. So free shipping on anything $75 or over. And look, with all those deals and so many more at just $25 a piece, I think you'll be very, very pleased with not just the quality, but the price point and the free shipping. It's MyPillow.com. I hope you'll use the promo code ChrisPodcast. MyPillow.com, ChrisPodcast, to take advantage of all these savings. Get that free shipping over $75. Or call 800-932-5056. Great operators, American-based operators. You can call and say, hey, I'm with you. And hang in there, 800-932-5056. Don't forget the promo code ChrisPodcast. It lets them know you listen, which I appreciate, but more importantly, get you that deal. MyPillow.com or 800-932-5056. Promo code ChrisPodcast. Wesley Hunt. He is a congressman representing the 38th District of the great state of Texas. He's a West Point grad. He's also coming to Philadelphia for an interesting event. June 4th. This is fascinating. And we're slated to talk with Michelle Tafoya, who will be a part of this too. And I can't wait to ask her if she's a cigar smoker. I would assume at least she doesn't mind cigars. This is called Congress, Cognac, and Cigars. Byron Donalds is going to be a part of this. Michelle Tafoya is moderating it. And Wesley Hunt will be attending this. Delaware Ave, the Cigar Code, is the name of the location on Tuesday, June 4th. Gosh, whatever will you talk about, Congressman? Well, welcome in. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on this morning.
Yeah, I can't imagine what will come up. That's going to be a robust conversation. I do want to, I guess let's jump off there. Why did you guys choose this? You and Byron Donalds and Michelle coming along to moderate it. Why did you choose to come to Philadelphia for the Cognac, Congress, and Cigars event?
Because it's our opinion that the Black community right now is ground zero to win this fight on November the 5th, 2024. And if you saw what happened yesterday, this is the biggest battle that this country has seen in decades. And what we realize is that Black men, particularly in Philadelphia, and particularly in areas like Philadelphia, we can get them to vote for us. We can get them to vote Republican if we can actually go to these communities and tell them why the Republican Party is best, not just for Black people, but for America. And we have got to explain to people that Black issues are American issues. And the person that is the remedy for all of this crap that we have seen for the past few years is Donald Trump. That's why we're coming to Philadelphia, and that's why we're going to continue to go to cities like Philadelphia to show the Black community that we are here. The Republican Party needs you. The Republican Party wants you, and America needs your vote for us to win decisively here in November.
Congressman, repeatedly, over and over and over again, Joe Biden comes to Philadelphia, and every time he does it, someone writes, and it's left-wing media who support him, and even they will write, gosh, he's having real trouble with Black support. He's losing Black support. Black voters don't seem to be warming to him. Again this week, he goes to what is a primarily Black school, ironically a private institution, a boarding school of primarily Black students who are in need. So it's a scholarship given away. It's a charitable institution who gives away scholarships to these kids to stay 5 days a week at a boarding school called Girard College. And ironically, their mission statement is so they can have a safe place to learn. And he goes to this place. He has the temerity to go to this place and speak to a primarily Black audience and talk about promises made, promises kept, missing the irony of the setting entirely.
Right. We're talking about 94 Crime Bill Joe. We are talking about if you don't vote for me, then you ain't Black Joe. We are talking about Joe Biden, who eulogized a grand wizard from the KKK. We're talking about Joe Biden that now is pandering to Black people because he's realized that he has done absolutely nothing for Americans and nothing for the Black community. And then now he has assigned Kamala Harris, who is the worst vice president in modern history for Black voter outreach, as if that's going to work. And the reason why they're doing this is this. They're seeing the numbers. President Trump in 2020 got almost 20% of the Black male vote. If he's able to attain between 25 and 30% of the Black male vote, mathematically, Democrats cannot win in these pivotal swing states. And so now they're looking up and they realize that they've made a colossal mistake because President Trump has been going to these areas. People are comparing the last 3-4 years of Joe Biden's presidency to President Trump's presidency, and they are realizing that we were better off with President Trump. Please bring him back. They're seeing these numbers. They're losing in all 7 swing states. They're hemorrhaging the Black vote, which has always been a cornerstone for their party, and then now they're in full panic mode. And the fact that they're behaving like this also should let you know that this is the canary in the coal mine, because Democrats never had to work for the Black vote. But then now all of a sudden, Joe Biden is finding some random Black family eating fried chicken with them at the dinner table, which is a complete joke. Black people see this. We are comparing what happened with President Trump. We had a better economy. We were safer. We had a secure border. We had so much more under President Trump. And then now it's all bad. So we had it good. Now it's bad. We have the opportunity to make it great again. And that's why Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are on their tour right now, because they're hemorrhaging the Black vote. They know it. And I think at this point, it's too late. And after the farce that we saw yesterday, I think the black community is going to double and triple down on President Trump here in November.
That's really interesting, Wesley Hunt, Congressman, Texas, 38th District. And by the way, if you are interested in this, it's a free event, but I assume people have to register for the Cigar Code on North Delaware Ave on Tuesday, June 4th. Congressman Wesley Hunt will be there along with Byron Donalds and Michelle Tafoya, the moderator. Congress, Cognac, and Cigars, it's called, on June 4th. You said that this 34-count indictment, Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 counts yesterday. You believe the black community looks at this? I mean, I don't purport to suggest you speak for every black American, but do you think many black folks look at this like everybody else looks at this and says, well, that's not right, and they know it's a sham?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you have been paying to social media, sir, and the black community's outrage at this on social media, or if you saw some of the comments that were made on the Breakfast Club yesterday. But to echo those sentiments, and you're right, I don't speak for all black people, but there are a lot of black people that are very upset with what happened yesterday. This is the first time a former president has ever been found guilty of a crime like this. We've never seen this in the history of this country. And I'm somebody that fought in combat. I fought to die for this Constitution. And I watched it yesterday get completely shredded. And yes, President Trump is going to recover from this because he is a political force of nature. I can assure you they're going to appeal this, and it's not going to change the outcome in November. But now they have exposed themselves, and they are willing to do anything to go after their political opponent. This doesn't happen in America. This happens in third world countries. This happens in banana republics. And the idea that a 77-year-old man that's absolutely never been to prison, never been to jail, never been convicted of anything, all of a sudden, as a former president, he has been indicted more than Al Capone at this point. This is a joke. And the black community that, well, quite frankly, because of 94 crime bill, Joe Biden, that has had the thumb of the justice system placed on them unfairly, especially in the 80s and 90s, because of people like Joe Biden are watching these same people behave in the way that they behaved in the 80s and 90s toward President Trump. And they're not going to let it happen.
Wesley Hunt represents the 38th District of Texas. Final question for you, sir, is, I know this is not new for you, and we've talked before. The Republican Party on Capitol Hill has often struggled. There are some resolute stars like yourself who are convicted and never waver. But we know the Republican Party is not known for its solid stance oftentimes. And there were a lot of people that were critical that there was too much quiet from the organized Republican machine on Capitol Hill. What has been the House reaction? I hear your reaction. You're fired up. We're not surprised, but your colleagues, Speaker of the House, Mitch McConnell on the Senate side, other senators, what's your read of your colleagues in Congress' reaction to this on the Republican side?
It's been conspicuously silent, and don't worry, sir. We are all President Trump paying attention. I am paying attention. Byron's paying attention. The people that have been loyal to President Trump from day one, we are all paying attention. This is now not the time, though, to pick a fight.
Yep.
This is the time for us to coalesce around President Trump, especially on days like this. Democrats do it all day, every day, and that's why we are in this position. We can handle what happened and the silence a little bit later behind closed doors. But right now, every single Republican has to pay attention to what happened yesterday. This can happen to any citizen in this country if it can happen to a former president. So I don't really care about your feelings anymore. I'm a combat guy. I never cared about your feelings. I cared about what's in the best interest of this country. And those people that are silent, I can hear your silence. But now is the time for us to galvanize, coalesce around President Trump so we can win in November, and then we'll have a fight later on behind closed doors.
I like that. Take notes, kick butt later, but for now, focus on the fight. Wesley Hunt, Congressman, Texas, 38th District, coming to Philadelphia on June 4th. The Cigar Code is the name of the place on North Delaware Ave. Congress, Cognac, and Cigars with Congressman Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt and Michelle Tafoya, the moderator. Congressman, thanks for your time. I hope you have a great weekend, sir.
The Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.